Jamie,
Steve,
how are we doing?
good, thank you. Nice to see you.
Good. Hey, we've always got some interesting stuff to chat about, but we've been scheming a little bit, and so we've got something we want to engage with other people. We've been hatching a bit of a survey, haven't we?
We have a plan to ask people for their insight.
Yeah, and so we're looking to try and capture the understanding of what it takes to be a good employee. What are the skills? What are the vocational abilities and capacities that employers value?
Yep,
How do academics train? And we're adding a student perspective this time.
that's right. So we've had a working title for this area of industry insights. The insights from industry employers as to what it takes, as you just said, for graduates to make the move into industry, into the workforce, and their readiness for that, their preparedness for that, and what the educational delivery, the educational curriculum, how well that prepares them for that move. So the task and the ask here is for our audience, for as many people as we can, to give us their insight, and by asking them questions through a survey, and that survey will be asking questions around what it takes to be a better employee and what it takes for that graduate to make that move successfully.
So, specifically, the call here is for students of sport and exercise science, people who have guided others, so sports lecturers, department heads, and professionals, people who are actually out there working in the area, and potentially who wanted to work in sports science but have got a perspective.
Yep.
They're now working in a different field.
And you say sports science, we're looking at probably broader than that: sports medicine, sports science, manufacturing industries. We know that graduates come out of a good sport and exercise science degree, and they're good graduates, and they can go into different industries as well. So we're not restricting it just to those working in the sport-related industry. That's just a thread, a connection that will be common. But we'd like to see perspectives from all different aspects of the sectors.
And so, what's the purpose? What we're trying to do here? I'm asking you this because we're collaborating, but the purpose and the value add to the area.
The purpose is insight. The purpose is to, first of all, to be able to, for those working in industry, to give them a voice as to say, what does the more successful employee look like at that point of entry into the workforce? For those who are educators preparing graduates to go into that workforce, what does that look like? How does that need to shape the curriculum and the learning experiences that you're asking your graduates to go through to prepare them for work? And for the graduate themselves, to give them a voice to say, how has that been for you? You know, how did your educational experience prepare you? And that move into the industry, how well do you feel you are equipped for that? And for those who are young employees in the industry, how well equipped did you feel? So with a recent educational experience moving into industry. So it's really the purpose of this survey is to give a voice to all those different groups.
And specifically, it takes about 30 minutes to fill it in. So that's an ask of people.
Yep.
But we're appealing here for people to contribute. We want people to sit forward and help us all understand the industry. And I think there's always been a need for this, really. I think there's, ever since probably the first professionalization of support teams, there's always been a need for us to understand this. For me, I felt that I haven't really known what I was doing early career. And when I've asked for help, it's not really been clear. And then later on, I felt this as a real pain point for me as a leader and manager of teams, both from an empathic point of view of trying to look for people and they haven't quite got the skills, and then some other people have got the skills. And what was the difference between those? That's at recruitment, but also in work, of when someone really flourishes and excels and when someone is found to fall short a little bit. So from those perspectives, there's a huge need for us to just get some clarity as to what is required.
Well, I think it's a noble ambition. It's good to do these things because it's really helpful for everybody. but it is a needed ambition because it is a blind spot. It can be a blind spot for educators trying to understand what industry needs and trying to second guess that, but also for industry to actually say, look, this is what we need, and we need graduates coming out with these skill sets, with these characteristics, these values, and this is how you can better develop that in the educational curriculum. So it is needed, it is noble, it is timely, like you say. We're in an industry where it's changed an awful lot in the last 20 years, certainly changed in the last 5-10 years as well. So this level of insight, why we're doing this survey, is to really help us understand what that looks like, how it's moved from last time, because we did this survey 5 years ago. We did it for an educational provider to understand how we could better shape a curriculum content. But it was extremely valuable, not just for that, but to understand the relationship between industry, organizations, educational providers. And that's not just at a curriculum content level, that's at the nature of that relationship and how that can be better facilitated to develop research connections and enterprise connections, for example.
And you mentioned you did the survey before in 2017, 2018, but principally that was the perspective of the employer, the professional, and the academic.
That's right.
But this time there's also the inclusion of the student perspective, because it's all right sort of saying, okay, have you found the people that you need and what are the qualities? Have you trained these people in a certain way? But what about the person in the middle, the person who's actually wanting to go out there and work and get a job? Getting their perspective of how did it feel? What helped you? What didn't necessarily help? What would you have changed in retrospect? And what do you need now once you're out in the big bad world?
Yeah, it's 100%. And that point of that transition from being a student to being an employee and everything that makes that up is an incredibly steep, curve. It's not necessarily a learning curve, but it's an incredibly steep steps, incredibly steep development journey to actually go into the workforce and understanding what the early part of that industry career might look like for you and the development needs that you have been met and maybe still need to be met as well. So yes, giving a voice to the graduate population and the current student population about how well prepared they feel for that is a critical part of this survey, and that's new for this time around.
So we need to be clear, this is for the professionals. Are you working in sports support at the moment? Sports medicine, sports science? Are you working in that area? Are you leading teams? Academics? Are you guiding others in a university setting? Whether that is course directors, lecturers, department heads, the full range there.
Yep.
And students, current students, or does that include people that have recently graduated?
Recent graduates, because they're a prime position
Yeah.
to reflect on their recent experience as a student, and also that move into the workforce and what that looks like. Just go back to your point about professionals. We're looking for the whole scope there. Part of that is around, as a leader of an organization, you'll have different needs as an entry-level employee. But that the voice of the entry-level employee is really important to hear, because they will be stepping into an organization with an expectation of how they will develop and what the support will be around them. So we'll take everybody. That's the whole thing here. Is the more intelligence we get, the more we can make of it.
And so specifically the benefits, we want to, I suppose, appeal to people's good nature to contribute to the industry. We're trying to make things better here. There's a set of information that we think can be levered to enhance graduate routes, but also what professionals might be looking for in their recruitment exercises, the sorts of CPD they might be investing in. Tangibly, we're going to provide a link after people have finished the survey to the 2018 headlines.
Yes.
And a full report if they wish to have that, and some extra resources depending on your route. If you're an academic, there's extra resources there for supporting students, professionals likewise, students likewise. And then we're looking to collate the information, and there'll be a provision of a full report so people can access the report once we compile it.
Yes, and that's right. And really that report is all about what industry is saying that education needs to provide for, what education is asking of how do we need to shape our curriculum. So that transition side of things, but also even within the industry itself, as in if you're an industry leader, understanding what the graduates and the new employees coming in are going to be bringing in terms of their expectations and their prior learning experience, and what that means for the development you might need to put around them. One of the big insights we saw 5 years ago in the previous survey was where there were blind spots, where particularly in certain cohorts that there wasn't a recognition of the importance of either a certain vocational skill or a certain way of developing that skill through the educational content and the learning experiences, and why certain things were more, or in some cases less important. So it's a real perspective. It's around. I always make the analogy, the metaphor. It's around getting around the table and seeing it from all those different sides of the table, getting the educator, the industry, and now the student themselves to give those perspectives, so everyone can see each other's blind spots.
Let's get into some of the findings, because it wasn't just there were some differences of opinion, but there were also some points of agreement too. Just some profound areas that everybody agreed on. And one that stands out was that increasingly in a competitive world, the student has to do more. They must do more in order to stand out, to differentiate themselves, with some subtleties of difference of opinion between how that's best achieved or whether it's relatively important. But nearly everybody who filled the survey in last time was like, well, if you want to make it, you're going to have to do a bit more to stand out.
Yep, and the key thing that came out, and it was a theme through the entirety of the survey last time, was the importance of work-based learning. So for the graduate undergoing a curriculum that involves work-based learning, so the realities of either taking questions, scenarios and problems and solving that in the educational setting, or the placement. So actually having time out in the workspace to not just understand what the workspace looks like, but to work in it. And the importance of that was, huge across all the respondents that we had, which is what we recognise, and it's why a lot of courses that have those features in them turn out more capable graduates to be able to move more easily into the workspace.
And there was a big agreement around we should all be working on this too, in that sense of we've got to collaborate on this, which for academic structures, that means that there's provision of time and space for that, but also professionals, to be able to gear up so that graduates or students can come into that environment, and that there is a system that supports them, hosts them, potentially pays them, or at least for their time, but has a graduate program of sorts, or an intern program that allows people to learn in that environment.
I think one of the real benefits of this survey going forward will be actually understanding the relationship between industry organisations and educational institutional organisations, and how that relationship, that collaboration can be better facilitated. What makes that work? What makes it really work? And that has implications not just for developing curriculum, not just for developing the development of the student or the graduate, but just for the nature of that relationship of a continual conversation between industry and education is something which we're all looking for to make that better. And that would be reflected in research, be reflected in enterprise activities, be reflected in the environmental statement of the next research exercise framework, for example, around how you're developing, how you're maintaining the collaboration, the relationship with industry.
So I'm looking at the 2018 report, which everybody can access if they fill in the survey. What stood out for you that we could sort of share at this point, that you reflected that actually jumped out as a big finding, or one area that actually we need to attend to?
I think there were two findings that I would point out now that I think are really important, because I think there will be themes that we will see all the way through this, and ever increasing, and that is the importance of vocational professional skills, work-ready skills for graduates, and how highly they were valued by industry above and beyond the technical knowledge skills, and how that was valued by everybody, but particularly from our industry respondents last time. Huge value to that. The second point of that was that clarity of what they need to look like when it's being the perspective from the industry employer saying, this is what we're looking for, and we know this. And we see this very clearly when we see good graduates, and we know what that looks like. So there was clarity for that. Interestingly, when you look at the perspective of the educational providers, they still valued the vocational skills, maybe not as much as what industry says, actually, this is really important. Education says it is important, but they weren't as clear, and I'm speaking very collectively here, the education sector isn't as clear about, well, what do they actually need to look like? And what are the educational experiences that help develop those in a way that are relevant, contemporary, same thing, relevant and contemporary, and timely for our graduate population moving into industry.
Are you being kind there about they weren't as clear, but basically 70 to 80% of academics said we don't know what is required, and that's a fair statement, and that's not as judging. That's replaying the respondents. We're not clear as what is required in industry. And
that's right, and that sort of sense of second guessing what an industry sector might be needing. You need to go and ask them. And this is the purpose of this survey, was asking them and giving them a voice to say, what does it look like? And as I said earlier, pointing out the blind spots there, and it's more important to know your blind spots than just to ignore them. And in this sense, what we were able to do and what we want to do with this survey is to get that insight, to understand, to be able to pull it back into the educational experience, to give a better educational offering to the graduate moving into the workforce, and give the voice to industry to be able to say, this is really important and we need this.
One of the statistics that came out last time was, okay, there was a difference of opinion as to what's required. And academics reported, no, we're not sure.
Yep.
And professionals, the majority said yes. But about a quarter of industry said, no, we don't know. And it was fascinating because actually it is quite a complex area. It's not as specific. It's dynamic. There are changing dynamics in work, and so to pin it down and understand it, for me, that was the heart of why we should be doing this again, is to capture it so that we can replay this back to all features. But for professionals, this is the sort of prevailing wisdom of what is required, and that as a resource for people, so that they have a bit more certainty when they go into that recruitment. These are the things that we are looking for, and to replay that in the job descriptions, at recruitment,
yes,
questions, assessments, and judgment in work.
And it's interesting you just mentioned that about job recruitment. And if you read role descriptions and person specifications of roles that come out across the industry, not just in high performance sport, but across in all aspects of the industry, of that clarity of what those statements, those bullet points, these are the people, the type of person we're looking for, and the type of job, and this is what will be expected of you. You can cross-match all of those against the questions we're asking in this survey, and obviously the outcomes and the insight that we're going to develop of, well, how well developed are each of those person specification things? Because you might be asking for it, but is there anybody in the industry, anybody in the graduate pool who's able to really truly do all these things? So if I was sitting as in an industry, you're saying about having clarity about what the good graduate needs to look like to move into our industry. It's those people who are involved in recruitment at every level of whatever industry you're in. Those are the ones where I think we'll get the real insight as to you're seeing it. You're doing that maybe quite often. You're recruiting new graduates into that workforce. So we were looking for that insight. We are looking for that insight from all levels of industry, from all levels of education, and of course from all levels of the student and the graduate themselves.
If you've got the professionals benchmarking, this is what the survey has found. These are the sorts of things that people are looking for. We need a little bit more of this, a little bit less of that, but it provides them with a framework so that they have a little bit more clarity at recruitment and in work. But equally, if students engage in this material, that will provide them with a bit of a head start, a foot forward in, right, these are the things that I need to make sure I'm attending to in my application, at interview, So that potentially could be a rich resource for students too.
I think so. I think part of the outcome of this will be what that looks like in terms of, like you say, preparation for a job interview, preparation to go through a recruitment, how you just write your application letter. What are the things that you're drawing attention to in your CV to show your experiences and your qualities and your qualifications, standing out from your peers. This is it's really competitive industry to try and get those nice jobs. So what are the things that the employer, the recruiter, is going to be looking for? So we certainly found that in our last time we did the survey, that was really valuable to be able to say to a student cohort, typically in their final year, for example, that these are the things you need to be thinking about developing. These are the things in your work experience and your work-based learning that you really need to be making the most of. And for the educators, these are the things you need to pull into your curriculum to make that happen.
Yeah, good. And potentially then there is a question here about when are these skills best attended to? I think that could be really interesting in terms of some things best in education, some things probably best in work.
Yep.
And so that in itself might differentiate, give clarity to academics, maybe focus on these sorts of areas. Professionals, you're probably going to need to be picking these up in the workplace.
Yes, exactly. And as a professional industry employee, you might be actually saying, some of these things we need to do within our industry ourselves because they're very work specific or they're very sector specific. And actually it's better done within the industry, better done within the workforce in terms of their CPD. So there's those sort of levels of insight, if you like, are the things we're looking for in this survey. We found aspects of that last time. We want to see that again.
Anything else that stood out in the survey?
Yep. Probably worth just pointing. So probably worth just pointing attention to some of the aspects around the traditional, the classical vocational skills, the aspects around behaviours, the aspects around how you operate as an individual, so the character, the attitude, your not just aspects of that around your sort of cognitive knowledge, which are absolutely vitally important, but the ability to communicate, the ability to work in a team, the ability to understand the culture of the workforce and what work looks like and the expectations of that. Those are questions we asked last time. There are questions we're asking this time. How important are they? They're all important. But some of them are real deal breakers, that if you haven't got them or you have got them and you're very good at them, you will stand out from the others. Some of them, as we've used the phrase, are star makers. These are the things that some of these aspects, really good communicators, people who show good leadership skills will go a long way in their employment. And these are the things that you might be looking for at that earliest stage of recruitment as well. So those are some of the highlights we saw last time, just understanding what the nature of that vocational skill set looked like, which are the educational experiences that best develop those, and going into that, looking at some of the content of the actual course curriculum and how well that is suited to developing these vocational skills, not as a separate thing, but entwined and interweaved with actual learning experiences of a course, how it can also develop the professional skills of the individual alongside.
And for me, there's always been a need for this. I think essentially to be driving the professionalization of our industry. I think I'm going to be interested, should I say, rather than sort of expecting, I'm going to be interested to see if there are any changes in the survey respondents for similar questions pre and post pandemic. Because I feel as though in situ, in teams, there have been changes. And so I'm going to be interested to see whether people are shifting in their attitudes or more demanding, less demanding on certain areas.
Agree.
And so we should be doing this probably regularly or to almost a bit of a health check for the industry as much as anything. But more than anything, I guess we're going to need respondents, people to be taking some time and filling in the survey and contributing.
Yes, 100%. This is all about, every voice that we have here is all part of the picture and all adds a huge value to this, to the insight that we can draw from this. And we want to share that with people who give us that insight. That's a precious, valuable experience that will be from whatever sector they happen to be in. Sharing that perspective, sharing that insight is incredibly valuable. So we want to be able to give that value back. by saying, this is what you told us, this is what the sector tells us, and giving that back to the individuals who respond.
And so, to be clear, fill in the survey. You will get a specific follow-up report. That firstly will be the full report once it's compiled. But in the meantime, once completed the survey, people will get access to the 2018 findings. That hopefully will be of use to people. We'll perhaps do a follow-up conversation just to unpack what we've found. We're presenting at the Bases conference in November, doing a workshop on that, so we can discuss some of the reports. So there's plenty of opportunities there to engage and pass on the findings, hopefully, that people can utilise.
Yes.
Good. Exciting. I'm looking forward to launching the survey and getting it out there and seeing what comes in.
Great. Me too. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you so much for listening. Please do take the time to click on the link in the description and fill that survey in. And hopefully we can make things better for the future generation, the existing generation, and our profession overall.